Okay, so we'll get started. I'm going to start with a few questions from yesterday. And we'll just go down the line. So Ajahn Ñāṇiko, the ones you didn't circle or check, those are the ones you didn't answer. Okay. 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 What is the correspondence between the 4 foundations of mindfulness and the 5 aggregates? Obviously, feeling is feeling, but what are body, mind, and Dhamma? Is mindfulness of the body mindfulness of form or mindfulness of sense consciousness? So with mindfulness of the body, that's the one we're focusing on mostly so far during this retreat, and Longpo Pasano really has been explaining it quite well. The mindfulness of the body, there's different aspects to it, so it can both just be sensing the body in and of itself, being aware of the body, being aware of the feelings in the body, or it can be actual thought processes, contemplations. So like the wording in the sutta, in the Satipatthana Sutta, one considers thus, this body is made up of various parts, such as head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, and so on, and considers those that the body is just that and nothing more than that. And or one considers thus the body is made up of 4 elements: earth, water, fire, air. But all of these satipatthana, they're connected. They're all connected. So feeling, I mean, there's feeling, there's physical feeling, there's mental feeling, and so it's really whatever's going to help the mind to disentangle itself from the identification with the aggregates. But we start with the body, and the Thai forest ajahns, they really tend to focus on body contemplation more, although Ajahn Chah, he was known as being a little bit different in terms of sometimes focusing more on the citta nupassana, the recollection of mind, or mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of mind objects. And I can't go too far into this because we will be covering Satipatthana more throughout the retreat. So hopefully this becomes more clear. But one thing also is that I can mention here is that mindfulness of Dhammas, Dhamma nupassana, that's sometimes translated as mind objects. But if you look at the Satipatthana Sutta itself, it's talking about various spiritual qualities. So I think of the 4th Satipatthana as like checking in with yourself. Where are you in your practice? So how is the 5 hindrances? How are the 5 faculties? How is the clarity of view around the 4 Noble Truths? And so all of these sets of Dhammas, the 4 right efforts, they come up in the 4th Satipatthana. So I see that one as like checking in with yourself in terms of like, where are you at in your practice? And you won't know exactly where you're at, but it's like taking stock of things, what's working, what's not working. Before I go on, I want to go into a little bit of terminology also, just in case it comes up. The word Ajahn, some people might not be familiar with that. So Ajahn, the word Ajahn comes from the Pali Acharya, which just means teacher. And so when we say like Ajahn Pasano, Ajahn Chah, that's teacher. And also we tend to use that title for the monks in our tradition who are over 10 vasas, who have over 10 years, 10 rains retreats as a monk. And also you might hear the term come up during this retreat, Kruba Ajahn, and that comes from the Northeast Thai. And when we say like a Kruba Ajahn, like Ajahn Mun was a great Kruba Ajahn, It generally denotes that they were great meditation masters, adepts, and that they also were teachers and had a following. And so usually the word Kruba Ajahn, that's what it refers to. And it's not quite sure the origin of the word Kruba, although Kru, you would think it was the combination of two Thai words, Kru and Ba, which would mean forest teacher, but actually it's a Northeast Thai word, it's Kruba. It's all mid-tone, so it actually more likely comes from Guru Baba or Guru Deva from the Sanskrit. A lot of Thai words actually come from Sanskrit rather than Pali. Next question, please give me an example of Samadhi. I think they're maybe meaning samatha here. Samatha, sati, and sampajanya. Samadhi, that's it. Yes, it's not samatha. Yeah, please give me an example of samadhi, sati, and sampajanya. So, I don't know if I can give an example of samadhi. But I could say the collectedness, like when the mind, or I'll even say the heart sometimes, because the heart being like the emotional center, the mood, is firm and stable and wholesome, and there's a sense of deep contentment, like you're just totally content, and you could stay like that forever. That'd be an example of samadhi. And sati is like recollecting, so like an example of sati would be like, say, you can't stop thinking about something. Say you can't stop thinking about the election or something like that. And then sati would say, oh wait, we're practicing meditation, I'm going to be mindful of the body. So that's an example of sati. Sampajanya, it says sampachaya, I'm assuming it means sampajanya. Sampajanya is like, it's normally coupled with sati, so sati sampajanya is mindfulness and clear comprehension. An example of sampajanya would be like when you're doing something, for example, cleaning your meditation space or your shrine, then you're fully focused on what you're doing, and you're taking there's a joyful and focused attention to detail and attention to what you're doing. And then you do a really good job when you have that kind of focus. So that's sampajanya. So all those things together, although sati sampajanya is needed for samadhi also. So all these things are connected. Sunday reflection. Thanks for the teachings. 2 short questions. 1, how do you spell Akamatar? And I assume they're referring to Atamayata. I assume that's probably what. And that Ajahn Pasano spoke of this AM that brings entry into emptiness liberation, and the reference to read about it. I don't have the reference for you, but if I spell it out for you, you can go to websites like accesstoinsight.org. That's all one, Access to Insight, all one word, and .org. Then you can type it in and see what comes up. So I believe it's, without a pencil, it's A-T-A-M-A-Y-A-T-A. Huh?
Is it double T? Or is it double? I thought it was a double. It's a double sign.
The first T is double or the second T? Oh, that's right, yeah. Oh, sorry, I'll do that again. A, T, T, A, M, M, A, Y, A, T, A. This is like one of those spelling bees I saw on ESPN3. Like spell Akamatar. It's like the final word in the contest. Ajahn Jeff in Wings to Awakening has a really good description of that. Yeah, the book Wings to Awakening. Yeah. So check that out. And second part is Marana Sati. Is Marana Sati practice/teaching listed under the element section of Four Foundations of Mindfulness or elsewhere? Reference if known. Why I ask this question is I would like to read what the Buddha said about this practice. Thank you. So Marana Sati, is that all under body? I think he goes through the charnel ground contemplations, but he doesn't go to Marana Sati per se. Yeah. Yeah, it's Marana Sati is not in the Satipatthana Sutta. It's in the Buddha does go under like the 9 charnel ground contemplations. The Buddha and its the body and its different stages of decomposition. And contemplating that. But in terms of Marana Sati, there's various teachings on it, and again, you need to, maybe because I don't have the references offhand, but there's one famous teaching about it where the Buddha is asking the different monks, how do you do Marana Sati? And like one of the monks says, well, I do it in that in the morning, I think I might die in the evening. In the evening, I think I might die in the morning. And the Buddha says, well, that's good, but you're still considered heedless if you do that. It's better than nothing, but you're still considered to not have heedfulness if you do it in that way. And so then he asks another monk says, I do it when I begin my meal, I think I might die at the end of this meal. And the Buddha says, well, that's all right, but still, that's kind of heedless. And then another monk says, well, I practice death contemplation in that I might die in the time it takes to chew and swallow a morsel of food. And the Buddha says, well, that's still considered heedless. And then another monk says, well, I practice death contemplation in that I could die at the end of this in-breath or the end of the next out-breath. And the Buddha says, that's good. That's how you're supposed to practice death contemplation. And Longpo Piek, one of the Kruba Ajahns, senior disciple of Ajahn Chah, he said you can take it even a step further, that you can practice death contemplation of every mind moment, that you live in death in every moment. So that's another way to do it as well. But I can't remember the exact sutta there, but you can search for it. There's still a question yesterday specifically for Longpo Pasano. I don't. He might get to one of the Q&A sessions at some point if he's feeling up to it. So we'll set that one aside for him. Next question: could Tanajan please talk about how to harness discursive thinking throughout the day to aid one's practice? I have not been reading recently and have not had to do much of anything that is intellectually challenging. So on the rare occasions I do make an effort to use this faculty, it is a bit clunky and imprecise. Are there techniques that have worked for you for keeping the thinking mind sharp and supportive, such as reflecting and investigating while doing tasks, reading, writing about Dhamma theme, etc.? This is a good question because I think it comes back to that whole idea of sampajanya, that finding some sort of mindful activity that we can focus on, such as reorganizing our shrine or cleaning our room or whatever work we do, and Or like if you do some sort of craft like knitting or crochet, that's like a really good engaged activity where you can think about it a bit and have some sort of design in your mind, and that also can help with body mindfulness, body awareness, or like an embodied awareness. And I noticed, or have noticed over the years, like these carpenters who have built all these great facilities at Abhayagiri, and actually there's a team of carpenters working right now at this moment on our new quadplex dormitory up the hill, and noticing they're really in their bodies, and there's this sense of like they have to think about what they're doing, but there's a sense of focus, and they tend to stay pretty centered in their bodies, even though they may not be Dhamma practitioners or have any real awareness of the Buddha's teachings. They have that kind of embodied awareness that we're looking for. So I always praise, taking on some sort of craft, and I think there's reasons why the Buddha used analogies like a turner or a turner's apprentice, like Lung Pa was speaking about this morning, a lathe worker, a skilled lathe worker making a turn or carving something, making it round, making something nice. That's a really good way to engage the mind. But also studying suttas, studying Dhamma, taking up some theme of Dhamma and making a study of it, that's also a good way to engage the mind, and really beneficial actually. And it's not taboo or bad at all to use the thinking faculty. What we're trying to do is train the thinking faculty to make it wholesome rather than unwholesome, and to focus on the right things. That's what we call yoniso manasikara. Yoniso manasikara is when we skillfully direct our attention to the proper themes, and themes that are going to bring us benefit when we reflect on them. Next question. During meditation, sometimes I feel a sense of tightness in the body. When I pay attention to that tightness, there is a feeling of loneliness or sadness associated with it. Should I keep focused on that sensation until it is gone, or another technique you recommend? So there's a couple things in there. Very good question. Sometimes if we focus on feelings of tightness, it's possible that the way we're focusing on it, this comes back to yoniso manasikara and also its opposite, ayoniso manasikara, wise attention and unwise attention. When we focus on a feeling, sometimes unwittingly we're actually reinforcing it or making it stronger. And this can happen with mental states as well, such as anger. And so the feeling of loneliness or sadness associated with it, yes, it may well be telling you something, some sort of trauma or some way we're relating to ourselves or others in a way that is causing that loneliness or sadness. Or it could be because loneliness and sadness, especially loneliness, this is a very interesting thing to think about. Loneliness tends to not be so much associated with being alone or not being around people, but loneliness tends to be more like a sense of disconnect or alienation, and we're always seeking some sort of connection, wanting to connect with someone or something, and then that's where that sense of loneliness and sadness can go along with it as well. That's where that comes from. So so the next part says, should I stay focused on the sensation until it is gone, or another technique? Usually it's not skillful to hope for it to go away. So that's when the aversion sneaks in there, when we want it to go away. We don't want it to be there, so we're trying to look for some way to focus on it in a way that'll make it go away. And rather than hope for it to go away or find some technique to make it go away, it's probably better to investigate it. We can drop a question in the mind, like, where is that coming from? And we can also breathe deeply and see what happens to it. try to set aside the desire for it to go away. It's a kind of a paradox. It's more likely to go away if we don't have that aversion to it, if we accept it, become friends with it, say that's just a part of us right now, that's a part of our experience, and that's something to be investigated, something to be looked at, something to be accepted. And loneliness and sadness as well, just saying it's like this right now, and it's not necessarily a problem. These things are all telling us something, they're all teaching us something, and we can, I think it also comes back to like coming back to the body again, like Luangpo Pasano was talking about this morning, coming back to the body. And if that tightness is too unpleasant, then coming back to, say, the breath sensation and focusing there instead, and seeing what happens then. Next question, and this is the last question from yesterday. Are Sati and the unconditioned the same? No. Sati is a conditioned state. There's no doubt about that. Although one of the epithets for the Arahant is one who is always mindful. But mindfulness, sati itself, is a condition. It's a very special condition. It's a very special condition which can lead to the unconditioned. So it's an extremely special condition. It's a sankhara. It's very conditioned, and we build it up and make it stronger by constantly recollecting what we're supposed to be doing at any given time in terms of like mindfulness of the body, or sati sampajanya, reminding ourselves to focus on the task at hand, try to stay in the present, and not get too distracted with other things. So yeah, sati is a condition, but it's a very important condition. Okay, and only 18 more. Not all of these are questions. Some of them are thank you notes. Very nice. First question. For the 8th of the 8 precepts, can I use a sleeping pad? The floor is really cold at night. The sleeping pad I have is the inflatable with 4.7-inch thickness. I'm not sure if it's too thick or not. Yes, that's definitely okay. We don't want you to torture yourself. When we say like not using a high or luxurious sleeping place, it's more like just using that word luxurious, like is it luxurious or not? So if you have a pad on the floor, or even just a regular old low twin-size bed, that's fine. I mean, it's more like keeping things simple. So and doing what the body needs. So sometimes if the people like a harder sleeping mat because it's better for their back, sometimes people need a softer sleeping mat. So it really kind of depends on what you need. But yeah, like a lot of people here will use a thermarest or some sort of inflatable mattress. That's totally fine. Second question, what should I do if I feel drowsy during sitting meditation? Thank you. There's a few things, like the Buddha recommends being percipient of light. So if you have a visual mind, like you can imagine light in the mind, in your mind's eye. That's one thing you can do. Deep breathing, or getting up and doing walking meditation. There is a really wonderful sutta where when Mahamoggallana, one of the Buddha's two chief disciples, when he's striving for the goal of arhatship, and he had to practice for a whole 2 weeks to attain arhatship, and he was dealing with nodding when we can probably assume he was not sleeping very much, but he was nodding, and the Buddha knew that the Buddha knew in his own mind that his disciple was nodding, and so disappeared from where he was and reappeared in front of Moggallana and said, "Are you nodding, Moggallana? Are you nodding, Moggallana?" And the old translation is really classic. Is "Noddest thou, Moggallana?" That's I believe that's the I.B. Horner translation. And he says, "Yes, Bhante, I'm nodding." And so then the Buddha gives him a number of, I think it's 11 different techniques for going against drowsiness. The first one is really interesting, and I don't have this list memorized, but the first one is very interesting in that change meditation objects. So like take stock of what you're using as your meditation object and try to change it up. Say if you're focusing on the breath, maybe go to mental recitation of Buddho, for example, like change it up a little bit, or focusing on the whole body rather than just the breath, and then seeing if that fixes it. And then if that doesn't fix it, then recollecting Dhamma, so using the thought faculty to recollect Dhamma. If that doesn't fix it, actually reciting Dhamma, so chanting. This is one of the places where chanting comes up, and Buddha actually recommending chanting the teachings that one has memorized. And then if that doesn't work, then I think the next one was pulling on one's earlobes and rubbing one's face. That was the next one. And there is something to that, actually. Specifically pulling on the earlobes I think there's something to that. And then the next one was, I believe, like maybe splash water on your face. That was the next one. And then it was, and Mahamoggallana, he's meditating outside. So the Buddha says, look up and all around, look at the sky, look at the stars if it's nighttime, look up all around, take some deep breaths. If that doesn't work, get up and do walking meditation. If you're still drowsy, then take a rest. So like the final one being lie down on your right-hand side, mindful of the breathing, mindful of how long you're going to rest, mindful of the time of getting up, and then continue the practice. So the final one being if nothing causes the drowsiness to go away, just like take a bit of a rest and clear up and come back to the practice as soon as possible. So that wasn't 11, that wasn't the whole list, but I definitely recommend looking that one up. It's a very good list. After several computer problems, I finally was able to connect with the retreat. However, for some reason, my name appears to be Stella. I am sure there is a way to change this, but given my lack of computer skills, Stella and I, Mary Lorenus, will both be joining the retreat. So I did notice that, but I saw your picture, so I knew it was you, and I was pretty sure your name wasn't Stella, but I was thinking maybe that was a nickname or something. My question has to do with caring and attachment. I feel like I care about something, say someone's health. If I sincerely care, then I must want them to get better. But is this wanting a form of attachment? I have no control over the outcome, but if I say I hope you get well soon, it seems hollow or just words. If I am not somehow attached or have a desire for the outcome to be positive. By the way, Longpo, wishing you the best in your recovery. So yeah, that's a good question and kind of a common way of relating to the Buddha's teachings on craving and attachment. But no, certainly we do want people to well wish for each other, and we do have a sincere hope that people do well. That's metta, that's basic metta practice, is the wish that for people to be happy, for people to be well. And that's a very wholesome wish, that's a very wholesome desire. So not all types of desire are wrong. There's the wish for people to be free of suffering, the wish for people to be happy. These are all very important desires and wishes to have in relation to ourselves and others. The desire for Dhamma, that's called Dhammachanda. There's these two different words in Pali, and there's tanha, which is in the Four Noble Truths, that's cited as the cause of dukkha. So there's tanha, and then there's chanda, and that can be wholesome or unwholesome. Tanha tends to be unwholesome. Chanda can be wholesome or unwholesome, but they're both translated as desire. So like in the Four Noble Truths, second noble truth, causes suffering, you have kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha, and that is the craving for sense pleasure, the craving for becoming or to be, and the craving not to become or not to be, so like the craving for annihilation. So that's the three types of tanha. But then with chanda, you have wholesome or unwholesome. So kama chanda is also sense desire. But then you have like Dhamma chanda, and Dhamma chanda is the desire for Dhamma, the desire for the spiritual. So that's a absolutely necessary, indispensable thing to have to cultivate the path. So certain types of desire are necessary. And so if we say somebody has chanda, like in our monastic way of speaking in the monastery, we say, oh, this person has a lot of chanda for that activity or for doing that. Chanda has this sense of like, you're going for it, you're doing it. And I think for me, tanha has more of a feeling of like murkiness or like almost like drunkenness, like bewilderment. So chanda's a bit more awake, a bit more clear, and you're really going for something. In the 480 padas, the four bases of success, the first of the four bases of success is chanda. And without chanda, without desire, we can't achieve anything. So we need that strong desire, or else we won't actually move in the practice. We won't actually go anywhere. But definitely good to do well-wishing for others in a very sincere way where you actually do have that wish. It's not at all a bad thing and recommended. During one sitting, do I stay with one meditation object or can I switch to others? For example, from focus on the breath, switch to contemplation of the body, contemplation of death, loving kindness. It depends. Usually we recommend staying with one meditation object during one meditation session. So like if you're sitting to say breath, but then the breath can bleed into body contemplation if that's kind of calling you. But in general, we do stay with one meditation object. But with meditation, again, it's what Longpo was saying this morning, ekagata, one-pointedness. It doesn't mean a point in exclusion to everything else, but it's a point which includes. And that's very important because like the breath, when we do breath meditation, that meditation object includes the body. Or when we mentally recite Buddho, Bud with the in-breath, To with the out-breath, that that mental recitation of Buddho includes the breath, because Buddho just means the knowing. It's reminding us to be with the knowing, or to be the knowing of the breath. So you can try to stay with one, but you can also switch, and it's good to stay with one object for a little while, but if the mind really isn't getting interested in it, and it's important that we have a meditation object that the mind starts to get interested in, then we might want to mix it up a bit, just like with Venerable Mahamoggallana and the Buddha telling him different ways to not be drowsy. Well, by the way, I just remembered one of those 11 was developing the perception of light. I think I forgot to mention that in the list. I mentioned it beforehand, but not while I was reciting that list. Or say you're going to do walking meditation and contemplate the 32 parts of the body, then it's good to try to do that for the whole period of walking meditation. But then if the mind isn't really getting interested in it, or if we're getting depressed, which is not the result we want from that particular practice, then we can move to something else. Same with death contemplation. If we're contemplating our own death or imagining our own death and the mind starts to get very depressed, that's not the result we're looking for with that contemplation. So it is actually helpful to know what results we're looking for, and the result we're looking for is ease, lightness, and a lifting of a burden. So the death contemplation, it can give rise to a sense of being unburdened, or a sense of freedom, and that, that's how wonderful that I don't have to take refuge in the future. I don't have to worry about the future, or don't have to imagine myself in the future if death could happen at any time. And so, but if the mind starts to go negative in terms of the death contemplation, then to temper it with metta, may I be well, may I abide in well-being, freedom from hostility and freedom from ill will, and so on, is like we do in the chant, and spreading metta to oneself and then others. So any contemplation that starts to cause the mind to get bored or depressed could be tempered with metta practice. Or if we're doing metta practice and it makes us depressed, we could go to death contemplation. It really just depends on the temperament. As I was walking, I focused on the body aspect of right mindfulness, and then the mind would appear and its contents would capture my attention. I tried going back to the body contemplation and realized, well, the mind is here too, and its content here. Maybe I should contemplate, investigate these other frames of reference. I noticed that the half-hour walk was going between these three aspects. Do you recommend that we work on the body and only the body at one setting and one sitting and others another, or is it as fruitful to work on with whatever arises? I think the answer might be yes, but I don't know if sticking with one aspect, such as the body, might produce better insights. Please advise. By the way, I am grateful to do this at home, as I realize the added benefit is implementing the retreat structure at home and hopefully retaining some of the structure after the retreat. Thank you very much. So that's a very good question, because in that explanation, that highlights that your mind was getting interested in the practice. And so doing body contemplation, realizing, hey, the mind is here too, let's contemplate that. And what's important is that interest, and what's important is that sense of contemplating and investigating experience. And I say, if you're doing that, and then that falls within the boundary of Dhamma practice, that's quite good. That's kind of like the little bird holding it loose, but not too loose, allowing it to move around, allowing it to poke its beak out of different spaces in the fingers. It's like the mind contemplating the body and then saying, let's do some mind contemplation, because those satipatthana, another way we could think about it is the fourfold foundation of mindfulness. all these things are connected. There's also a phrase in the suttas when the Buddha talks about the khandhas, the 5 khandhas, he says they're conjoined, not disjoined. So, and nama rupa, what we translate sometimes as mind and body, these are together, they're not apart. And so as a whole, we just have our experience, and we have the Buddha giving all these recommendations how to reflect on our experience. So whether it's the mind or the body, if there's interest there, if the interest is going somewhere, then go with that interest, because then the practice is going to start getting interesting, and we'll start making discoveries about ourselves, about the Dhamma. So I would say just keep going with that interest, as long as the interest is within the 4 foundations of mindfulness and not elsewhere. Dear Ajahn Ñāṇiko, would you please give us a little background and philosophy of Chi Gong, how it's helpful to the body? Thank you very much. I have done it with you many times and enjoy it a lot. I am grateful for your offering. Thank you. I haven't studied the philosophy of it so much. I learned Chi Gong from Longpo Pasano in 2004 and was very grateful, and I've practiced it since that time. And my Chi Gong practice has changed and shifted over time, and I've just always found it very beneficial, particularly for having a sense of balanced energy in the body, and also I find it a very meditative activity, so it's kind of like a way to do standing meditation or moving meditation. It's all about circulation, and it's all about the back and the knees. I almost never have back pain, and I attribute that to Chi Gong. I've had periods where I've done a lot of sitting, and had periods where I've done a lot of physical work, labor in the monastery, and I've had little bits of pain here and there from time to time, but I think the Chi Gong really helps with that. And I do think some of the philosophy about having good circulation is that when blood can circulate freely to every part of your body, the healing process can take place quicker, and you have things like less inflammation. Your all-round health is generally better. So I think that's part of it. No question, just this. As I head to bed at the end of this second day, my heart is full. I want to express the deepest gratitude to Longpo, Ajahn Krunadhammo, Ajahn Ñāṇiko, and the entire Abhayagiri community, as well as to Kathy, our kind and gracious retreat manager, and the close to 100 yogis practicing in separate dwellings across the globe, but coming together as Sangha. Sadhu, 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 sadhu. And very good. That's one part of Chittanupassana, knowing an expanded mind as an expanded mind. That's when we feel that sense of gratitude or the expanded mental state, that's incredibly wholesome, and it's also wholesome to express it and let others know about it. Greetings, Venerable. I take part in support groups for relatives of those who are dependent on intoxicating substances. I take away time from Dhamma activities to participate in the groups and also be of service to those who are still suffering. Sometimes I feel guilty about that. Sadhu to the Ajahns, Kathy, and everybody else who are making this retreat possible, and also to those who participate. Many wishes for Longpo Pasano's health to recover soon. I don't know if I need to feel guilty about helping people. That says take time from Dhamma activities, but that can also be included as a Dhamma activity to help others with, say, things like addiction. That's a very important service to society. But it's just finding what's going to be of most benefit. The Buddha actually, very interestingly, in a sutta, he says there's these 4 types of people. He says the first type of person is the one who neither benefits themselves nor others. And so that's, say, it's done in terms of the 5 precepts. So for the first type of person, neither benefits themselves nor others. That's, they don't keep the 5 precepts and they don't encourage others to keep the 5 precepts. The second type of person, they benefit others but not themselves. So they encourage others to keep the 5 precepts, but they themselves don't keep the 5 precepts. Third type of person is the one who benefits themselves but not others. And that's explained as they themselves keep the 5 precepts. They don't encourage others to keep the 5 precepts. Fourth type of person is the one who benefits both themselves and others. So they keep the 5 precepts and they encourage others to keep the 5 precepts. And the Buddha says, of course, the fourth is the most excellent among these 4 types of people. However, the third is higher than the second. So the one who benefits themselves and doesn't benefit others is considered higher than the one who benefits others but not themselves. And I always thought that was kind of curious and interesting. Perhaps it could be applied to this situation. Greetings, Venerable. We are 3 friends coming together in the same house to be a part of this retreat. Venerable, is there any advice that you could give us? We are very grateful for this opportunity. Yeah, just support each other and make sure that all 3 of you are into what's happening, are into the retreat and supporting each other in meditation. If you have friends who are Dhamma friends and all interested in meditation and practice, that can be an incredibly powerful support. I found that with sitting in meditation with Ajahn Ñāṇiko and other practitioners, other monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen in Bodh Gaya at the Bodhi tree, doing long meditation retreat. Having Dhamma friends there, you're not talking, you're not interacting very much at all. You're sitting next to each other for several hours a day, and that can be incredibly supportive. On the flip side, if you end up distracting each other and stuff, then it might not be so supportive. So just making sure that all 3 of you are keen on the retreat and that you're all into it, and then it'll be incredibly supportive, and you'll probably end up practicing harder than you would otherwise. When an enlightened being dies, his body goes back to nature and that's it. Nothing else happens? I don't understand what gets reborn in a non-enlightened being. This question inevitably gets asked at some point, or this point of like what gets reborn. And this comes back to one of these things, like we'll never really find a clear answer in terms of like what, I want to know what it is, I want to know what happens. And if the body and mind are not self, then what's being reborn, who is being reborn? And the Buddha has different analogies, and you can make a study of this on your own as well and see what the suttas have to say about it. There's not so much, but there is some places where the Buddha talks about it. to make a long story short, essentially, craving itself is what is reborn. Craving itself is what takes rebirth. That's why when there's no more craving, there's no more rebirth. Because craving itself is what is reborn. Or we could view it from a different angle. Kama itself is what is reborn. And we use conventional speech, we are the owners of our kama, heirs of our kama, and so on. But then that brings up the conundrum of what receives the kama. But I don't want to get into this too much because it can be quite perplexing. And when people ask the Buddha about this, he said, "You are perplexed about a perplexing matter." But the simple answer is that craving is reborn. Tanha is reborn. The cause of suffering is reborn. When an enlightened being dies, his body goes back to nature. The elements go back to nature, or the elements always were a part of nature. It's not that there's a hymn that his body goes somewhere else. And there's something else that goes somewhere else other than the body, but it's more just the elements breaking up. An enlightened being, they say, there's the quadrilemma in Indian philosophy. Do they exist? Do they not exist? Do they both exist and not exist? Do they neither exist nor not exist? That's the quadrilemma. It has to, in Indian philosophy, any type of existence has to fall within those four. The Buddha said that all four of those are not valid when talking about the mind of an enlightened being after death. And so then his questioner would say, well, then they're annihilated. And then the Buddha's like, well, no, that goes back to they don't exist, and that's not the case. But it's, again, coming back to reframing something. You can't say they don't exist, but anything you could reference them by no longer applies. We can think of this too, like awareness. The Buddha used this analogy of light to talk about the mind of an awakened being, that it's like a light that doesn't land anywhere. So a light that doesn't, you can only see light when it lands somewhere. You can't see light unless there's a place for it to land. So similarly, there can't be, say, rebirth-producing consciousness unless the consciousness lands somewhere. And the consciousness is always landing somewhere. There's the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. At any given moment, all of our lives, for all of this life and all of our past lives, then the attention, we'll call it attention, the attention is landing somewhere. It's either going out the eye, landing on a form, going out the ear, landing on a sound, going out the nose, landing on an odor, going out the tongue, landing on a taste, going out the body, landing on a tangible sensation, going out the mind, landing on a thought or a mind object. And so that's like light landing somewhere. So then there's bhava, there's existence, and we have this experience based on the attention landing all over the place all the time. So as a contemplation, we can, you could even perhaps fold it into citta-nupassana, thinking about or considering what would that be like if the attention didn't land anywhere. So it evades all sorts of once you conceptualize it, that's the attention landing on the concept. That's the attention landing on your conceptualization of the goal, of the unconditioned. It's not, so it's still not there. So the Buddha gives this analogy of if you have a beam of light, say like you have sunlight, you have a house, and so you have this four-walled structure. The light hits the wall, it lands on the wall. If you take the wall out, it lands on the floor. Take the floor out, the light lands on the earth. And you take the earth away, and the light doesn't land anywhere. It's just light traveling through space. Can you say the light doesn't exist? You can't, but there's no way you can know it's there either. Yet, nonetheless, there is light. So if we use that analogy and instead of light, we replace light with awareness, that would be one way to think about the mind of an enlightened being after death. What would you suggest one does when he or she feels so down he or she doesn't want to do anything? Yeah, that's generally called depression, and that's it just really depends on the individual. If it's really bad, yes, Dhamma practice can help to an extent, but sometimes we get stuck in this rut where just don't want to do anything. Sometimes having friends, talking to people, becoming more active, that can help. Doing more walking meditation, if you're doing the retreat, focusing more on walking meditation rather than sitting meditation, can help. It's like trying to find some way to uplift or inspire the mind. And this is where Dhamma friends, teachers, this is where this becomes very important. Or if you can even just pressure yourself just to, say during this retreat, just to do the schedule. And if there's enough energy just to do that and just like not even expect that anything will happen, that's still better than nothing, than not doing it. And sometimes something can come out of that, actually. You can also try to look into the mind a bit and see, try to pinpoint where is the unpleasantness that is leading to that feeling of being down. That's something I did in the past, which did help. It led to some insight where I was very down early on in my monastic life. I was very down during one period, and I ended up using a practice of focusing on trying to pinpoint where the emotional pain was centered, and that was incredibly helpful, and it did actually help to pull me out of that rut that I was in. So that's one way to do it. When around people who are pursuing things like fame, wealth, or act in wrong ways, I find myself judging them. I often find myself disconnected from our society because of this. What would you suggest one do in such cases? It's difficult to find people I truly connect with. Yeah, if the mind is even a little bit wholesome, there might be a sense, like a strong sense of right and wrong. And yes, we'll be able to accurately judge things as right or wrong sometimes and be like, what are they doing? Or why is it that way? And, whereas at the same time, we can get really we can tie ourselves up in knots or get ourselves really down if we get too far into like criticizing and judging. And it can also detract from us working on ourselves, working on our own practice. And so disconnected from society, I mean, that's a very common feeling, I would think. And yeah, it can be wholesome. It can be, if it gives rise to this sense of like Dhammachanda, like searching for something else, searching for another way, wanting to engage in the practice, perhaps seeing that's a possible way out of this kind of disconnect that we're experiencing. That's one possible wholesome result of this. And it is difficult to find people one truly connects with. It's rare. It's rare. It's looking to see who has similar aspirations, who has a similar type of goal or aim, and that can be quite difficult. Thank you for the spiritual deep cleaning. How does one move past the first and second jhana? I seem to get stuck there for obvious reasons. Thank you. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to tell you. But you're extremely advanced if you're already in those states, those kind of attainments. Even the first jhana is classed as a superhuman attainment, Uttari Manusa Dhamma. And I would start by maybe questioning whether you've actually gotten there or not. And also remember that, say, like when we talk about something like first jhana, I remember the second day I was ever at Abhayagiri as a visitor, we went up to the other Thai monastery up above our ridge, KPY, and their master, Luangpur Thun, was visiting. And we had a Q&A session with him, and he had come from Thailand, and Ajahn Ñāṇiko was translating. He was the guest monk here at the time. And I remember him making a very interesting point, and it always stuck with me, that he said, you Westerners, you should cultivate panya first. You should cultivate right view first, and then get into samadhi, because he said most Westerners who attain the first jhana are 100% sure it's enlightenment. They're 100% sure they're enlightened, and then because it's so radically different, that the first jhana is so radically different from our normal waking experience, and it's like the first time we've experienced this kind of true, absolute contentment and happiness and temporary liberation of mind. And that's so radically different from our normal judging, critical, slightly unpleasant all the time mind. And we're going to be sure that we've had some sort of, stream entry breakthrough or something. So he said that that's a danger, actually, and not to overestimate ourselves. That being said, some people do have a natural proclivity toward samadhi and do have these things. For myself, my mind ends up thinking a lot, and it takes a lot of meditation time for me to get the mind to calm down even a little bit, and so I can't really speak to the nitty-gritty details of how to move past the second jhana. But definitely good if you're already there. I don't think you need to worry about it if you really are there. 5 more questions. We're past time. I'm surprised that I normally get through all questions, and I can normally answer them very quickly, but I've met my match this time with the questions, and I'm going to have to leave the next ones for tomorrow. So we can change postures at this point, or keep sitting, and I'll ring the bell on the half hours, and can come back on the 15-minute marks or on the half hours, and then we'll have the optional Chi Gong at 4:30.